Breaking news, President Trump has just announced on social media that Israel and Hamas signed off on the first phase of a peace agreement. Let's bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis. Olivia, thank you for being with us. President Trump says there is an agreement on this first phase of the peace plan. What does that entail?
That's right. This was as much of a nail-biter as there ever was. There had been expressions of cautious optimism throughout the day, but it really came together this evening with the president's announcement. I mean, even as of this morning, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was slated to travel for a day to Paris to meet with foreign ministers from the region about governance in post-war Gaza. He told lawmakers instead that he called off that travel because this deal was close and it would require him possibly to travel to the region instead. An eagle-eyed photographer even captured a moment when Secretary Rubio handed President Trump a note that said that the negotiators were very close and he had to approve this Truth Social post announcing the parameters of the deal. We know that negotiators had been working very hard, heads down in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and were focused on this stage at hammering out just how this initial part of the agreement will work, down to sequencing how far back Israeli forces will need to go and what conditions on the ground need to be in order to have the living hostages handed over. And once they were close enough, they were joined today on the U.S. side by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and aide to the president, Jared Kushner. Top aides to Prime Minister Netanyahu, Ron Dermer, were also there, a Qatari contingent, Egyptian contingent. And now this is all still just on paper, and the real test will come when the hostages are expected to be handed over in the coming days. Israel will have to make good on its promise to deliver close to 2,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange, and of course to withdraw its forces to an agreed-upon line. We are still waiting for the exact details to come, but the president announcing tonight something monumental after 2 years of brutal war.
And we want to clarify, this is the first phase of a peace plan. What else needs to be agreed upon?
That's right. This is just part of what was a broader 20-part deal that the president laid out first on the margins of the UN General Assembly to Arab and Muslim leaders. That was a 21-point plan. Then it evolved to a 20-point plan when he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu, who visited him at the White House in the Oval Office. And that plan includes a scenario for post-war, what governance is supposed to look like, what the role for the Palestinian Authority may be, what disarmament will need to look like for Hamas. Those are the details that the negotiators are going to have to continue working on after this first phase. But President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had always made clear that a full-scale release of all of the hostages and the remains still in Hamas's possession were a prerequisite for the rest of the negotiations to continue.
Olivia Gazis, thank you so much. All right, I want to bring in now CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe live for us outside the White House. Ed, the president says there is an agreement, as we said, on this first phase of the peace plan that came down from the White House just a few moments ago in a Truth Social post. What can you tell us?
Well, Elizabeth, as Olivia had been telling you there, we had been anticipating something might come tonight and that it would come first from the president on behalf of the negotiators in Egypt. That statement tonight saying that an initial first phase has been reached and that he expects that all the hostages will release very soon, whether that's 48 hours, 72 hours from now, whether that's 48 hours, 72 hours after the agreement is finalized by the Israeli government remains to be seen. But notable also, he says, once they're released, Israel will withdraw their troops to an agreed-upon line as the first steps towards a strong, durable, and everlasting peace. Thanks all those that have been involved, notably Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey especially, and ends it by saying, blessed are the peacemakers. This comes after his personal Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has close personal business and political ties to several different Arab leaders, having negotiated the Abraham Accords during the first Trump administration, arrived, as you see there, in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, earlier today. And Egyptian President al-Sisi, in a speech, had invited Trump to come to Egypt should an agreement be reached. It was that caused the president to then tell reporters during an event with other conservative journalists earlier today that he would likely make a trip to the Middle East this weekend. During that meeting, it was interrupted by the Secretary of State, who slipped the president a note which told him that they were very close to an agreement and they needed him to draft this statement. So you see him there. That was when it was handed to him, and he looked impressed and broke up that meeting a few minutes later, went out to draft the statement that we now know tonight. So we will wait to hear from leaders in the region overnight into tomorrow morning. But here at the White House, at least, they got to be quite pleased. They are quite pleased that this announcement could be made in at least the first step of these long-sought negotiations, just 2 years and 1 day since the conflict was started by Hamas militants. We may now be on the verge of heading towards peace.
Yes, and you said that the president was intending to head there this weekend. Ed, is that still on the table, and is that to negotiate this next phase of the peace plan?
All he said is that he may go Saturday or Sunday, and when he was asked by another reporter, will you go dependent on the release of hostages? Like, do they have to be released first before you go? He said, no, not necessarily. He also suggested he'd love to go to Gaza itself. That's unlikely, given the current security situation there, but maybe there's a way to fly over and see some of it. Either way, given that it was the Egyptians that invited him, it appears that's where he would go, likely at some point over the weekend, and while there are arrangements being made for the release of hostages.
And I just want to clarify for our viewers, Ed, if they're just joining us now, this first phase of the peace plan involves the release of all remaining hostages and withdrawal of Israeli troops. However, we don't quite know the timeline of how those events are going to play out.
That's right. And there had been last week, remember, there was that 20-point comprehensive plan for peace that the White House released, and then Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, very quickly signed off on. They had released a map that showed sort of a phased withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, pulling back from the coast and then pushing back towards Israel itself. Conceivably, that's up for negotiation, but that's what they're talking about, is that you'd pull back to a certain point, then another one, and then complete withdrawal eventually one day once all of this is resolved. There's still a lot to sort out, though, Elizabeth. Who runs Gaza going forward? How is it rebuilt? What happens to Hamas militants who have been involved in this? And if they want to renounce their membership, where would they go? How would they get there? And would they be able to go peacefully? And then what does this mean for the Israeli political situation domestically? There's been a lot of concern about how the prime minister has conducted all this. Does he hold on after this or even during the talks? All of that yet to be sorted out. But the fact that they could signal tonight phase one is there is a big deal to this White House and certainly to those who've been seeking Mideast peace.
Absolutely. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much. All right, let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Deb Patta, who is live for us in East Jerusalem. Deborah, what do we know about, number one, the details of this agreement? But first, I want to ask you, how are people there in Israel reacting to this?
Well, it's very late here, early hours of the morning. So there hasn't really been any official reaction. We've seen Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu post on social media that he hopes to bring the hostages home soon. But this is going to be a huge moment for the families of hostages still in Gaza. It's believed that there are 48 captives. There's still 20 of them still alive. This is the moment they have been longing for. They've been waiting for over 2 years, campaigning day in and day out. People have been on the streets almost every single week, huge demonstrations demanding that their loved ones come back. They have not given up, not stopped for one single day. So this is going to be the best possible news after 2 years of waiting and hoping. And if things go smoothly, we understand it could even start as early as this weekend. In terms of that original 20-point plan, it seemed that they would come out possibly over 1, 2, or 3 days. But exactly what those details are, those have not been released yet. We do know that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will convene a security meeting of his cabinet to discuss and approve this plan and to make sure it goes forward. So that's certainly from the Israeli side. This will be good news. And obviously in Gaza, people have been waiting for this war to end. It's a punishing war. Over 67,000 people have been killed. Huge swaths of the territory have been destroyed, and almost the entire population has been displaced. So I think that for people in Gaza, this couldn't have come any sooner in many ways.
It's coming 2 years and 1 day that marked October 7th attacks Hamas on Israel. And I can only imagine what this must feel like for the people that are there. But I'm curious, Deborah, when it was talking about the 20-point peace deal, this 20-point peace plan, how do folks in Israel feel about the U.S. taking such a strong leadership role in these negotiations?
Well, certainly from the side of the hostages and many of the people who've been out in the streets demanding that their Prime Minister bring their loved ones home, they're very grateful for the US involvement and have said so repeatedly. In fact, the hostage families even sent a letter to the Nobel Peace Committee saying that nobody has done more for peace in this region than President Trump. So they are thrilled that as far as they're concerned, the US is an integral part of this peace plan, and they've long been campaigning Washington to be involved, to make sure that this happens. So from their side, this will be a very, very welcome move indeed. From the side of Hamas, they too have put out a statement tonight saying that they appreciate the efforts of both the United States and the mediators to get involved and to get the deal this far. What they do keep reiterating from Hamas's side is that they want to ensure that the guarantees are there that Israel sticks to the deal. For Hamas, this means that Palestinian prisoners will be released, that there'll be a staged Israeli withdrawal. What that will look like, we don't actually know, but we know at one point they were demanding that that withdrawal should happen as the prisoners are being released. Whether that's the case, we don't know. And of course, then there's those sticking points, disarmament, their potential exile from Gaza. Is that going to happen? And have those details been worked out? That is not clear. So there's still a long way to go. But in terms of hostages coming home, that looks like it could happen very soon.
That is a huge development in this. Deb Patta, thank you so much from East Jerusalem. All right, let's bring in CBS News Middle East reporter Courtney Kealy. Courtney, this first phase of the peace plan, again, including the release of those hostages, a relief to folks in Israel, and also the withdrawal of Israeli troops. And I'm curious, you're speaking to people on both sides of this issue, and you have contacts there in the Middle East. I'm curious what you're hearing from people there on the ground. I know it's very early in the morning there.
Yes, it's very early in Gaza. It's very early in Israel and Jerusalem. But this is a peace deal that people almost dared not believe could happen. Now, we were commemorating October 7th yesterday, and the first thing that I got on October 7th was a message from a family in Gaza that said, "We're entering the third year of war. God help us." And now we're seeing President Trump say, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And the peacemakers and the negotiators in Egypt gave him his due. There were pictures of them hugging. There was a picture of the top intel chief that really represents President Erdogan of Turkey in the room. Hugs were happening, but they waited about an hour for President Trump to take that victorious lap on Truth Social. We've heard from Karen Levitt that he has a doctor's appointment, that he should travel on Friday. We're also hearing from a statement posted by Benjamin Netanyahu that it's a great day for Israel. He'll convene the government to improve the agreement and bring all our dear hostages home. He thanked the historic soldiers of the IDF and those whose courage and sacrifice had gotten them to this day. Now, Hamas was decimated. All their top leaders were taken out. The more of the external forces in Qatar were at Khalil al-Hayya, the top negotiator, was in Egypt. But we saw the Qatari Prime Minister. We saw the top spokesperson and the person closest to President Erdogan. We saw all these people in the room coming together. And when President Trump thanks Arab and Muslim leaders, it's sincere. He started this in his administration by making that trip to Saudi and the UAE and Qatar. It continued recently with that security agreement with Qatar. The Arab and Muslim populations and the Arab and Muslim leaders want the Palestinians to see relief. They want to see this peace. It works for everyone. It's in their self-interest. And now that Hamas really is just a small group of militants left on the ground, young men taking up arms, we'll have to see how they disarm all of these people in Gaza. There's a complete breakdown of rule of law. That will be important. Every step will be important. But you see the agreement. I don't think the Palestinians dare to breathe a sigh of relief, but when they see that humanitarian aid coming in, when they see that there's a new framework and leadership coming in and the Israelis can move back, they're living in tents, they're bathing in dirty, polluted, raw sewage and sea what in the sea. They're having all sorts of medical issues, so it's going to have to be almost triage going in there with humanitarian groups. And there was mention that President Trump wants to go to Gaza. The only way I can see that, the only way I can see that happening is if he went from the Egyptian side. Sharm el-Sheikh is on the Sinai. You can travel down to Rafah, which is the southern border of Gaza, and there could be a kind of humanitarian zone. We've seen some of the top American leaders kind of go in that area that would be safe and secure. But we'll see what security-wise, what's possible and where this will happen. I mean, the president being in person, thanking all the leaders that he's worked with, and it is an historic day. Now, obviously, we'll get mired in details, but the killing should stop, the displacement should stop, and the hostages should be released. Now, we're looking at a 72-hour timeline after the Israeli government convenes and signs that off. But according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, it looks like he's ready to get this done too.
Courtney, Kealy, thank you so much.